Hey, everybody. My name is Caleb Cunningham. This is my live policy presentation. I'm a student at USC Sumter, and I wanted to take some time to talk to you guys today about something that's important to me as a film student or an aspiring film student. This has to do with the film industry and kind of a controversy that has erupted in the film industry over the past, I think, two-ish years, be safe to say. And it has to do with AI technology, AI generated content, and AI content engines, which are capable of using algorithmic kind of mechanical processes to analyze how human beings create things like art, for instance, or films, and then to replicate or imitate that, drawing, I guess, inspiration in a sense from the man-made art. And so you're seeing more and more these days this AI generated content floating around everywhere, and these corporations, film corporations, as this technology has proliferated, become more accessible. There are film corporations that have begun to rely on it more and more, and the kind of general trend right now is that these corporations are going to start relying on it above kind of human artists, to prioritize it above human artists because of how cheap it is, how cost effective it is, and just how effective it is at replicating man-made art. But my contention is that this poses a threat to the livelihoods of artists in these professions, and also that it beyond that threatens the kind of integrity of the artistic pursuit. And specifically, I'm going to kind of focus on film with that. And so when we're talking about issues of this nature, I think it's really important to appeal to the insight of people who have been in these enterprises for a long time. And who better to do that with than Guillermo del Toro, one of the most prolific filmmakers of our time. In a recent interview with BFI, titled on YouTube, Pinocchio director Guillermo del Toro on the joy of handcrafted animation. Del Toro gives kind of some premonitions about AI technology, AI generated content and art, arguing that, this is a guy, by the way, who has been in this industry for decades at this point. And so he's been around through similar technological shifts, which is something that he mentions in this interview. But the thing that scares him the most about this technology, as opposed to other advancements in the past, is that whereas previous technological advancements in the film industry were there to serve or to help the artist to achieve a more clear and precise artistic vision, basically to help them to serve them, right? This technology, AI technology, exists solely to bypass the artist, is the word that he uses a lot in this interview. It exists to bypass human artists, to replace them, to supplant them, and to do the work that they were doing before without human beings being a part of the equation and without human creative input. And he argues that it will likely be misused, and that also one of my favorite quotes from this interview is that he mentions that art is not unlike other things. Art is not a commodity in the same way that food or these other things are. It's not a commodity. It is supposed to be an outlet for creative expression. And when he says that when a film, for instance, doesn't pass through three hands before it has been released, then you lose something. And he says you lose two of the hands that made it. Art is about, from his perspective, and the perspective, this sentiment is shared obviously by many other directors. It's not just him, many other filmmakers and artists across the board, that art is supposed to be about humanity and the exchange of human thought and emotion. So why would we remove humanity from that pursuit? Now, I want to kind of expand this discussion outwards a little bit and talk about also, the legal side of things, because I think people are often, remiss to mention that a lot of these AI content engines, they rely very heavily on copyrighted material, and they sample copyrighted material without, which means that they use material that to train themselves on how to imitate human art without the permission of the artists who made the content that they are being trained on, if that makes sense. In an article by Seti Riddy over at Bloomberg Law, in this article, by the way, is titled "AI Imitating Artist Style Drives Call to Rethink Copyright Law." She sort of gives a survey of the ongoing legal, discourse right now among legal experts and among copyright lawyers, and how the growing consensus as of right now is among these experts is that there aren't enough like robust protections in place to keep artists safe from being exploited by this technology. As not only because of the tangible and demonstrable effects that it has on the livelihoods of artists, but also how it, like I mentioned, how and like Riddy, explicates throughout this article how much of these content engines, they rely on copyrighted material, which is a breach of law, and arguably kind of a draw or calls into question the morality of using this technology because of how it relies so heavily on that. And also, to, I guess, expand even further outward, there are other discussions in other spheres going on right now with like unions, for instance. One union that recently was kind of embroiled in controversy would be the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. In an article titled "In Hollywood Writers' Battle Against AI, Humans Win for Now." This article is by Jake Coyle, by the way, for the Associated Press. He kind of covers these strikes, the WGA strikes, and how about a year and a half ago, there were these kind of simmering concerns among writers and like script writers and stuff in the film industry that AI technology was kind of encroaching, I guess, on the livelihoods of these writers, who were being often either outright replaced by the corporations that kind of hired them before, and the ones who were kept around were then like forced to use AI kind of assisted technology in order to streamline the writing process. And so this is not something that these writers wanted at all. It's not something that they appreciated. And so they went on strike, and the strike was successful. They were able to extract some concessions and secure some concessions from some of these corporations. And now at least writers within the WGA cannot be forced to use this AI technology. However, those concessions and those what do you call it? Those concessions, they don't apply to people who are like not in the WGA, I guess. And so, in the interest of expanding the discussion even further and to protecting more people, the Human Artistry Campaign, which you can find at their website, thehumanartistrycampaign.com, in an article which it almost functions as their mission statement, titled "Core Principles for Artificial Intelligence Applications." They kind of cover, I think, 7 basic guidelines for what they deem to be the most appropriate use of this technology in the hands of like artists and at the discretion of like these corporations and stuff. And so one important thing to note about the Human Artistry Campaign, is that so we'd already talked about the WGA. So the WGA is actually a part of the Human Artistry Campaign. They are they are a huge coalition of unions. I think about 50 of them, 50 different unions, including the WGA, including, acting unions like SAG-AFTRA, and lots of others from all different kinds of mediums and stuff. And so this, again, is like a huge conglomerate of lots and lots of different unions which have come together in this campaign to articulate in one place a very clear and firm, a very clear and firm stance on this issue. And I won't go over each of the things that they outline. Like I said, I believe there are 7 or so, but the kind of gist of it is they believe that AI generated art and these AI content engines, they can be used appropriately, but their concern is that the artist has to always be given, the human artist has to always be given precedence and given priority over these algorithmic kind of these machines, basically, that are vying to replace them in a lot of ways. So they kind of articulate in this article things that we've kind of already been over, like more copyright protections against exploitation, and a more heavily fortified protections against the kind of negative effects and adverse effects that this technology can have on the livelihoods of artists. So in conclusion, I think a lot of artists right now are afraid of being reamed out of their professions as this technology has kind of taken root and taken the entertainment industry by storm. Lots of different corporations are already implementing it into their content streamline, like the way that they're structuring and producing content now. A lot of them are relying a lot more and more on this technology. And I think about it when I think about this issue, I think about like if you were to go to a football game and all of the players were robots, none of them are real, they're all automatons, right? What would that be interesting to you? Would that be compelling? Would the stakes feel high? I think, and in some ways, sports they're a great example, because I think there's a lot of artistry in even that in sports and physical sports. In the same way that I think, films or books or whatever that are produced entirely but through these algorithms and these artificial intelligence like processes, in the same way that they would be lacking in the kind of what makes most art so compelling, I think be the same for like a football game. You're watching a football game, and what makes sports, for example, so compelling is the recognition, even if subconscious recognition, that each and every player on the playing field is a real person who struggled to be there and struggled to achieve to get to the point where they could perform basically on a stage of that sort in front of thousands and thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people, these huge sweeping audiences, in this huge spectacular event. The human component is so vital to what makes sports interesting, in the same way that the human component is what makes, art so interesting. And I think if we remove it and subtract humanity from that equation, that we are defeating the purpose of the art form, and not of different art forms, and not to mention, preventing people from like pursuing a livelihood through the whatever makes them passionate. And yeah, so I guess kind of to recap and sum everything up, I think that policy-wise, we should kind of direct our efforts to these different unions that are capable of lobbying on behalf of these artists. And also we should appeal to lawmakers and to copyright lawyers who have the expertise and the prowess, to push for more fortification in this arena. And so, yeah, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for attending. And at this time, I will now open it up to a Q&A. So any questions that you have, feel free to ask.
Let me unmute here. Okay, so first question that came to mind, of course, was like clarification for any of the AI tools that you would be using, or like that people are trying to say like this takes away like the creativity, this takes away like the human investment. Like, what are some main tools? Because I know that there's like actual just AI production of things, and there's also AI
Sure.
tools to enhance or to like edit. So, any clarifications there?
Sure. Okay. So I think that, so for instance, there are different AI kind of programs now that, like when I mentioned earlier the WGA strikes, one of the issues there was that these corporations, they were like making writers use these programs to like write scripts for them. And then after the script was written, then the real human writer would go in and then kind of prune it for mistakes or maybe edit it a little bit. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about. That sort of thing where, like you said, I think that there can be a place for maybe using maybe some kind of AI program to enhance something that was made by a human. But if the AI itself is doing the creating, if it's doing all of the creative kind of heavy lifting, then and then more importantly, if that is being kind of enforced by kind of a big sort of like overhead corporation, and when the artists themselves would rather avoid using that sort of technology, then I think that that's kind of where the harm comes in. So prioritizing human creativity over algorithmic like AI generated whatever creativity. Because if you think about it, these these programs, they're not actually creative, like really. They are just really good at they're really good at pretending to be creative, I guess. Like we talked about earlier with the copyright and stuff. These programs, a lot of them, they sample copyrighted material. What that means is that they analyze, they study kind of how human beings create art, and then they kind of just regurgitate that and like throw different things together with these algorithms and stuff. So it's never like actually truly original what these things are producing. It's a lot of it is just kind of like mishmashed from all different places and sources and from copyrighted material. So anyways, I hope that answers your question.
I don't have many questions. I just have one, but um, I know you mentioned policy as a big thing here towards the end of it. Just a little question on that. What steps do you recommend for like I'd say like aspiring artists? Like you have like young kids or someone in high school or college that's just getting to art and such. What do you recommend they do?
So I would recommend, probably first and foremost, if you can, to network with these unions that can safeguard you against like being exploited by in lots of different ways. These a lot of these unions are good for more than just this issue, but particularly as it's relevant here, to if you are totally against and allergic to the use of AI at all in your art, then there are different places that you can go with the kind of, again, the organizational power to keep you safe from that. And I guess beyond that too, if you're not totally like allergic to, if it's not like anathema to you to using AI in some ways, I think that, you know, learning how to use it appropriately and learning how to like what the applications are of it that you're comfortable with, and then being able to like articulate that to people that you're working with, especially like executives and stuff. That sort of thing can be really, I'd imagine that would be really helpful as well. So hopefully that also answers your question, sir. All right. Well, were there any more questions? No. Sorry.
I mean, I
We,
was kind of like wondering more about the policy, but honestly, a lot of what you said kind of answered my question. I just wanted to know like specifically like, kind of like how you came up with specifically that union that you mentioned as like one that's like trustworthy or that will advocate for like the rights. Like what are there any other like unions that you know of that have like policies that you don't agree with? Or
um, not off the top of my head, but I'm sure that they're out there, you know. Yeah. So that would just be kind of a matter of like personal discretion and finding a union that represents what your concerns are and what your interests are best. And also finding one hopefully that is like ethical and so but yeah.
yeah,
All
I
right.
can't think of anything else that
Okay.
wanted to make.
I got no questions here.
All righty. Well, thank you both for joining me today. And I hope you guys have a good one. I hope everybody watching also has a good one, that you take care. Thanks again. Goodbye.
Thank you. You had some great insight.